Hello and welcome to another SciFirst MovieTalk episode. In this episode, I'll be discussing the 2009 thriller movie and sequel Saw 6, as directed this time around by Kevin Gruter in his movie directorial debut, after working as part of the editing team for the first 5 Saw movies. So, as per my reviews for the last few movies in the franchise, I will issue the same disclaimer. What I would say is if that you haven't watched Saw 6 specifically, or, to be honest, any of the movies in the franchise, then I wouldn't watch this review. Now, I'm going to try and keep it as spoiler-free as I can, but by insinuation, I may end up giving something away, and this is a film, indeed they all are, really, that you really do need to watch without no prior knowledge of them whatsoever. However, from my perspective, given the way that the last few movies kind of ended and where this series is going, and indeed where this movie kind of picks up, it's going to be difficult to avoid talking about spoilers, and certainly for the films that kind of preceded it. So, yeah, if this applies to you, switch off now, but please do come back to SciFirst MovieTalk and let me know what you thought of the film. I would be very interested to know. I always am, certainly on this Saw series. If you haven't seen them, it would be fantastic to know what you think. They can be very divisive, I must say. So, okay, are we ready? So, Saw 6 starts immediately following the events of the 5th movie in the series, and sees Detective Mark Hoffman, as played once again by Costas Mandylor, continuing to carry out Jigsaw's grand plan as one of his accomplices. As indeed we did find that out, obviously his role at the end of the 4th movie, and then kind of followed that through as he tried to frame FBI agent Peter Strahm, as played by Scott Patterson, for the crimes in the last movie. Jigsaw, aka John Kramer, as played once again by Tobin Bell, is now dead, and indeed basically has been for quite some time, since the end of the 3rd movie, in fact. Jigsaw, of course, being the antagonist from the first 3 movies, with a, shall we say, unique idea on rehabilitating people who are, in his opinion, wasting their lives or those of others, testing them with a series of often gruesome and nearly always fatal kind of sort of traps and games. This entry into the franchise sees Hoffman, now the last man standing, so to speak, seemingly come away from the events of the previous movies unscathed. However, the FBI have their doubts on Strahm's involvement with Jigsaw, and new evidence starts to surface which points to somebody else being Jigsaw's accomplice. Like a rat in a trap, Hoffman does everything he can to escape suspicion, but feels like the walls are closing in on him. In an effort to finish Jigsaw's work, he sets in motion a new game, Jigsaw's last and kind of final act, if you will, which pits insurance mogul William Easton, as played by Peter Outerbridge, against a series of morbid traps and scenarios in which he must decide who lives and who dies from members of his own workforce, after basically having been so ruthless with other people's lives, including John's, in his dealings with his firm's insurance calculation, which places a value on a claimant's lives. And indeed, being unscrupulous and unyielding in nullifying claims made on small and insignificant errors made by the applicants, leading to one very gut-wrenching and seriously sinister endgame. So, Saw 6 then. It wastes no time, to be fair, getting us straight into that gore once again, in a macabre game of self-preservation, paying 2 individuals who had been running scams together to give their own pound of flesh, so to speak, to tip that balance of survival in their own favour. But, to be fair, this is about as extreme as this film actually gets, for a while. It does actually try and strip the movie back to the series' kind of investigational roots, quite a lot more than some of the other movies have done recently, adding more story elements than ever before, and involving us in the investigation that starts to form around Hoffman, and indeed his inevitable attempts at covering up his involvement. You get the clear feeling early on in this film that this is going to be a different breed of Saw movie altogether. With this perhaps being more of a, well, maybe more of a stylish entry, I would say, but ultimately lacking in the kind of substance that made the other films what they were, for good or for bad. It certainly has you cringing within the first 5 minutes or so. Absolutely, there is no doubt about that. And indeed, there are more than a few gore-filled moments along the way. But this entry does try and concentrate on setting up the base for what's to follow, rather than offering out-and-out carnage, which, on the surface of it, would be a good thing, right? The thing is that, yes, the story is more involved, okay, in this entry. And indeed, the film is more of a true thriller this time around. Its attempt, however, at padding out the premise that is now kind of becoming quite tired, subsequently kind of falls flat and doesn't offer anything new to the table which would kind of entice its viewers. It spends basically the first 20 minutes or so giving us a recap of the series so far, which, to be honest, is pretty much surplus when all's said and done, you know? In this movie, it really does feel like we're just bolting on story elements in order to add padding. It just doesn't sit quite right with me overall, if you've not gathered. And there are a few things that I don't really think hold as true as they should. For instance, the premise of Jigsaw's work also deviates in this movie, and what I think is pretty much the first time in all of the movies that we've watched so far up to this point where innocent people have become involved in the games in a direct way, such that they stand to die if indeed the wrong choices are made. What's more, in Jigsaw's original games, the point was always that people could be saved if they listened to and followed the rules. Barring, of course, Amanda's victims, as we saw in sort of like the third one, but that's another thing. This time around, however, it seems more vengeful and biased towards the kill itself. In each game played, somebody had to die. And that's not strictly how Jigsaw played his games. And I do understand that, yes, in theory, it's Hoffman at the helm and not Jigsaw himself. And so that style, you know, that the style of the games and everything could be a bit off as a result. This is Hoffman at the helm, you know? However, it is made clear in the movie that the design and the requirements for who plays were actually set out by Jigsaw prior to his death. So it doesn't add up. Everybody in the movie, you know, overall, it just seems to be so tired. And it really does show on screen, with the characters seemingly just kind of going through the motions for the most part. The whole affair feels a lot more drawn out and more clinical in its approach as we kind of try to understand the additional backstory that we are being fed, basically, that we're being presented with. The build-up of Hoffman as a character that worked so well in the 5th installment just fails to achieve the same heights in this movie. And although he is, again, the main focus, we just get the feeling that we're kind of going round in circles with it all, and that his heart just isn't in it. But the film certainly has some redeeming qualities. For me, it's probably the lowest point in the series so far, but I can't argue with the attempt to take the film in a different direction and to try and kind of bed in more of a thriller-style approach. It was a bold move, considering the template that had kind of begun to be set by the previous movies in the series. The film also marks the first time that we get to see and be involved with the victims up front, before they found themselves unwittingly placed into Jigsaw's traps. So we kind of have their story, also we think, and then understand the motivations from the very off for them being placed into the game, which indeed, considering what had gone before, was a very interesting perspective. I personally don't think that it worked in any great fashion to kind of change our perspective of the games themselves, but it was different to see more of the backstory for each of the characters playing those games prior to them kind of meeting their untimely demise. It was also great to see John and Amanda, as played by Shawnee Smith, to sort of see them both back again. Okay, so it was kind of still in flashbacks, if you like, given that they're both now dead. But they still actually had some great on-screen chemistry for the short time that they were actually on-screen together, which kind of brought back some of the fond memories of the third movie, and indeed the games being played therein, which form part of this film's basis to some extent. So in that, it was really quite nice that they found a way to kind of link in the events from the past entries, and indeed, yet again, both Bell and Smith brought back the charisma and the commanding presence of their characters, which this film so desperately needed. Also, I thoroughly enjoyed the investigative elements with the FBI. It was like watching like a mini CSI, and I love CSI. The look on Hoffman's face is absolutely priceless as he is found out, as being as being Jigsaw's apprentice, squirming as much as we do. So overall, yeah, this is a disappointing entry, if you like, into the Saw franchise for me overall. Okay, I would still agree it's still quite intense at times, and indeed has a few ingenious traps and tricks up its sleeve, but you can certainly feel Groutette's different directional style here. Perhaps indeed more artistic and, yes, stylish in appearance, that's for sure, but ultimately the film just kind of feels dry and suffers badly with its pacing, and merely kind of plods on with almost a kind of a bolted feeling with no distinct vision. It tries to give meaning to the characters, and they do indeed have a lot more depth than we've seen before. But for some reason, they just aren't as interesting as they should have been. And the same can be said for the overall story itself. It's intriguing, certainly, but just not enough to really grab and hold your attention. Indeed, the film actually has one of the better twists in the series, for me, that we have seen, to be fair, for quite a few films in the past. It's just that, really, it gets more of a flat build-up than it really does deserve. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Many thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, and other movie-related content. We have absolutely loved having you here at SciFirst MovieTalk, and we definitely would love to have you back. But most of all, just thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.